Welcome to the coaching table. I'm Thomas Thompson, and I help leaders like you have the conversations that you're not having so you can lead yourself well. Because I believe that if you struggle to lead yourself well, you will struggle to lead those around you well. So we're going to help you with that. One of the conversations we're having right now centers around the word delegation. If you want to scroll down and click the link, you can go back and watch week 1. Basically, the thought there is that great leaders learn how to delegate well. And if you want to improve your own leadership, you want to take a step forward in that, you've got to be able to hand things off so you can be focused on what you need to be focused on. And if you want to develop leaders around you, you also have to delegate well so they begin to handle the responsibility. And we're using this metaphor of a football. And so let me show you a little diagram here that's going to help you kind of understand this concept. Here it is. I call this the Delegation Football. Now, you may look at this and think that it looks unlike any football you've ever seen, and you'd be right. Except what I'm flashing back to is back in high school at the lunch table with my buddies when we get bored, and then someone would take out a piece of paper and they would create this little football that then we'd flick it across the table. We'd have goalposts. We'd have a scoring system. It got very complicated, but basically this is the football. So imagine now, okay, now you're with me, right? Football, okay. The delegation football, the handoff is so crucial. It's the handoff of delegation where most fumbles occur. So what does a good handoff look like? Well, let me show you 3 elements that need to be handed off well. Responsibility, authority, and then accountability. Let's walk through these. Responsibility is the question, what is on my plate? When you are handing off the ball to an employee or to a direct report and they walk out of your office, does he or she have clarity around what is on my plate? Recently, I spent 3 days in the mountains here in Colorado with a team of people at a board retreat working through some strategy stuff. And what was most powerful, I think, was not just the honest conversations and the strategies that came about those 3 days. It was really the last 45 minutes of our time together where there was a whiteboard and it had 3 columns on it. What is next what is the next step? Who is in charge of it? And when will it be done? I love that because we spent time walking back through, hey, we said this and we said this. What are the next steps and who's going to do them? And I realized if we didn't have that 45 minutes, we would have all walked out, it was a great retreat. We learned all this stuff. What's next? I don't know. Because we hadn't gotten clarity around the question, what's on my plate? And different people walked out of that room with clarity around, I know what's next for me. So is there clarity around the question, what is on my plate? This really centers around the idea of responsibility. The second part of the handoff is the word authority. This is really the question, what are my permissions? What are my boundaries? What are you giving me the authority to do? And then what are those boundaries I don't need to exceed? A number of years ago, I led an organization that had a $1.7 million budget. And I was in charge of kind of managing that budget and running with it. And that budget had to be approved every year by a board. Now, there was a provision here in some of our bylaws that if there arose a situation where I had to spend money that was unbudgeted, I had a certain amount I was allowed to go to. The amount for me was $20,000. And that meant I could spend up to $20,000 without board approval. But if I spent $20,001, I needed to go and get their approval. I loved that boundaries. Here's why. It gave me clarity around the question, what are my permissions and what are my boundaries? And I knew going in, hey, if this thing hits me and it's larger than this, then I don't have the authority to make that decision. But if it's under that amount, then I do have the authority to make that decision. In other words, if I bother the board with a $500 purchase, they're going to go, why are you wasting our time? You have the authority to do that. Go do it. And on the other hand, if I spent more than $20,000 without asking them, they would say, whoa, you've exceeded your boundaries here. So this is an important part of the delegation handoff. Is there clarity around what I have the authority to do and not do? And then finally, and this is crucial, is the word accountability. Accountability. How will I know I hit the mark? I feel like in my work with organizations that really it is the word accountability and evaluation, those two words that seem to be missing from most organizations. They're not done well. We're not always clear, what does an A look like in this class? How do I know if I'm hitting this? Recently, I was working with a team of leaders that had some great goals for the next year. They had some great objectives and strategies and plans. It was all great. And then I asked this question, how will you know when you hit the mark? How will you know what an A looks like? And I could see they didn't have an answer right away. And we worked on that for a while. So they were super clear. And when we ended, both their supervisor and they knew exactly this is what it's going to look like 1 year from now to have an A here. There's some accountability in place. These are three key components. If one of these three is missing, you're going to have a fumble. Now, next week, I want to get into a little bit more about what do those fumbles look like and how do we avoid them. But let's just back up and kind of recap here. The delegation football is responsibility. What is on my plate? Authority. What do I have the permission to do and the boundaries not to do? And then accountability. How will I know I hit the mark? All three of these center around one of my favorite words, clarity. If you don't have clarity around all three of these things, when you hand off that delegation football, you're going to have a fumble. So let me give you a coaching table question to kind of evaluate. As you look over your own leadership, here's the question. Where have I most seen fumbles in my delegation leadership? Where have I most seen fumbles in my delegation leadership? And once you begin to identify that, that's an area to improve. Well, I'd love to hear some of your stories about fumbles and successes with your delegation. You can scroll down and send me a little email there and we can continue this conversation. I'll follow up next week with some more on the concept of what are the fumbles that occur in our delegation handoffs. But until then, you're always welcome at the coaching table.